Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix?
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window, or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
Welcome to the desert of the real, my beloved true seekers. Welcome to the machine, my son, and the means to escape it. Heresy shouldn't be this much fun, but it just is. It just darn is. Robert Frost partly summarized why heresy's so much fun when he said, "Forgive, O Lord, my little jokes on thee, and I'll forgive thy great big one on me."
This is blasphemy! This is madness!
Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio broadcasts at the virtual Alexandria, that state of mind where East meets West through the God above God that can. This is the greatest adventure you'll ever find yourself in. The one of Gnosis, knowing who you really are and what reality is really not. We don't take prisoners but liberate them. We are not the final authority on anything, but hope to be an endless possibility for everything. We are against all intolerance, against all political correct dispensations. We are not bigoted ourselves, but prefer to stereotype because, well, it's more politically correct. We are not for any cause, but only causing your inner alchemical transformation into the best divine version of yourself. As a listener, Jason said about Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, it's all spiritual wasabi.
I am not a number. I am a free man.
We're raging against heaven and storming the gates of Tartarus for our misplaced childhoods and paradises lost. Divided we stand, together we rise, losing our minds and coming into our senses in the black iron prison. We Johnny Cash Bodhisattvas, ascended masters and masturbators, and modern day Tom Sawyers, our mind not for rent by any god or government.
You have to consider the possibility that God does not like you, never wanted you. In all probability, he hates you. This is not the worst thing that can happen.
It isn't.
We don't need him.
Jehovah and his archons are gunning for us through their slaves in the establishment and the elite and that crack whore called fate. But they're finding that we are ready in the battlefields of the true seeker warrior that Kabir wrote about, armed with our creativity, curiosity, and compassion.
Yes, these are bruises from fighting. Yes, I'm comfortable with that. I am enlightened.
As Krishnamurti said basically, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Or as St. Paul says in Romans, Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
What's the journey I have to make, you have to make, each of us has to make? You talk about something called the soul's high adventure.
Follow your bliss. Find where it is and don't be afraid to follow it.
I am Abraxas, that redeemed alcoholic archon as the Gnostic texts describe him, in his meat puppet incarnation of Miguel Connor, broadcasting from the lawful dystopia of Chicago, patiently waiting for the beginning of the world, awakening divine sparks, one pink beam at a time since 2006. If hell had a spokesperson, I would carry her teleprompter. If Atlas had a coughing bout, I would be his jockstrap. If Hera had another jealous meltdown, I would be her vibrator. If Cthulhu rose from the polluted oceans, I would be the one to ask for his citizen papers. If Apis needed an enema, I would...
You are a sad, strange little man.
Before we get into a very perilous yet satori show with our astral guest, Sarah Beak, let me do my webvangelism. Or move the cursor to around 15 minutes to get to her interview if you can't take it. But let me remind you of our Aeon Byte 2.0 initiative at Indiegogo.com. That is INDIEGOGO.com. Or check out our link at our webpage. There is only 1 week left, and we haven't even gotten halfway in reaching the dark dream of a new era video, topic expansion, and the follow-up to Voices of Gnosticism. This expansion will benefit you, revealing new vistas you've never dreamed of. So let us grow this heretical tribe once and for all.
Once again, things that could have been brought to my attention yesterday!
We are falling short, even with the amazing contributions of several of you kind collies and cool crowleys. Only 1 week left, and this is my last-ditch effort to get this thing off the tortured ground. If not, we'll see what happens, although the podcast will likely continue.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
If you don't have shekels in your D&D bag of holding to support the Aeon Byte 2.0 initiative, then please spread the logos. Kidnap some rich philanthropists giving away money to such worthless causes as saving Deepak Chopra or planting the forehead of Richard Dawkins. By Odin's dingleberries, kidnap Deepak Chopra or Richard Dawkins. 1 week left, my beloved truth seekers. 1 week left. In the meantime, what else can I or any of you do but write our own gospel and live our own myth, as always?
Don't you see? It's not about you. It's about them.
But I can't go back.
Don't know that you got a choice, son. No man can walk out on his own story.
On this approximately July 20th, the year of our Demiurge 2013, as mentioned, we have the great honor of being joined at the virtual Alexandria by Sarah Beak. She will be discussing her new work, Red Hot and Holy, a heretic's love story. The book is a spiritual biography, preggers with sacred and profane insights that are right in line with the ethos of the Gnostic-minded throughout history, throughout sexuality, and throughout the farthest shores of imagination. The book is a penetrating and perceptive and even prescient read, where Sera imparts warehouses of Pandora's box insights. For more information on Sera and Red Hot and Holy, please visit sarahbeak.com. That is SERABEAK.com. One
of God's own prototypes. A high-powered mutant of some kind never even considered for mass production. Too weird to live, and too rare to die.
Sera gets so much right in Red Hot and Holy, like truly and fully capturing the essence of Hagia Sophia. After all, the wisdom of the divine is not a goddess per se, not worshipped in any Gnostic text, maybe prayed to in one section of the Nag Hammadi library, if that. No, Sophia is more of the goddess above all goddesses. A super archetype, a mythic heroine representing the inner process of the waking of our divine spark. And she is certainly the ultimate alien consciousness, calling us to find our lost souls and into an ecstatic union with the eternal realm.
I don't believe it. It's not possible.
I didn't say it would be easy, Neo. I just said it would be the truth.
Furthermore, she is always reminding us that we are aliens too, perennial outcasts or the passerbys of the Gospel of Thomas, when we finally become honest with our hearts.
Fuck damnation, man. Fuck redemption. We are God's unwanted children? So be it!
As scholars have noted, Sophia and her avatars are a true representation of the trickster god archetype. She is curious, disobedient, a helper of humanity, and an imparter of contraband knowledge. Sophia is also very sensual in the context of Culiano's Tree of Gnosis book, in that she experiences all that can be experienced with higher and lower senses, drinking all manner of forbidden fantasies as she falls from the pleroma, leaves her home in a dark rapture. Her very fiery passion and emotions impregnates her, and eventually, according to some Gnostic myths, makes her give birth to the very universe and its ruling ego.
God isn't interested in technology. He knows nothing of the potential of the microchip or the Silicon Revolution. Look how he spends his time. 43 species of parrots. Nipples for men.
Sophia can also be very neurotic and hysterical in some accounts. In the Nag Hammadi libraries on the origins of the world, she splits herself up into the figures of Pistis and Sophia, two characters that fight each other and manipulate the cosmos with more zeal than any starlet from a Game of Thrones. Yet Sophia is also loving and comforting, even towards her own son, the Demiurge, beyond all human conception, but earthy in her caring for her lost shards of divinity, stranded in the many cosmic airport lounges of the material dimensions.
She tore a hole in our universe, gateway to another dimension.
Mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children.
In the Nag Hammadi libraries, Trimorphic Pretanoia, a text where Sophia actually saves Jesus from the cross, she says in one of her incarnations, "It is through me that Gnosis comes forth. I dwell in the ineffable and unknowable ones. I am perception and knowledge, uttering a voice by means of thought. I am the real voice. I cry out in everyone, and they recognize it, the voice, since the seed indwells in them."
You no trouble. Me, fifth element. Supreme being.
Certainly pay attention to Sera's incendiary views on the false light. I should have mentioned this during our chat, but in the Pistis Sophia, Sophia herself is lured away from the eternal realm by the false light, created by Authades, her rival, and basically a mean queen Aeon, who is jealous of the youngest personifications of the alien god or the undocumented deity.
I am the beginning, the end, the one who is many.
It's a hard fight in the battlefields of the True Seeker warriors of Kabir, but the Pleroma never promise you a rose garden. It's all fun and games until someone loses a third eye or gets kicked in the Philosopher's Stones. Again, don't forget about the Aeon Byte 2.0 initiative. Please, and enough of my drivel. Let us do the interview with Sera on her new book, Red Hot and Holy.
I can't imagine you with all your complexity, all your perfection, all your imperfection. You're right. Look at you. You're just a shade. You're just a shade of my real wife. And you were the best that I could do, but I'm sorry, you're just not good enough.
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we definitely have the pleasure of being joined by Sarah Beak to discuss her new book, Red Hot and Holy, A Heretic's Love Story. How are you doing, Sarah?
Great. It's good to be here.
Great to have you on, and we've already had a great pre-interview, so let's hope we can top that. But anyway, why don't we start from the beginning to your childhood? As your book says, you were always quite a God fangirl, weren't you?
Yeah. When I was little, I was just madly in love with the divine, and I was raised Catholic, so that was the lens that I had to use. So I would, write I Heart God on all my homework assignments and really wanted to be a priest and was just pretty devoted to that path. And I found out in 6th grade, I came across a book about reincarnation, and I was fascinated with it and went to confession the following week and started blabbing about reincarnation and other spirits and different realms, and the priest was not too pleased. And we had this really interesting sort of argument / debate, and I left the church that day, not out of just rebelliousness or anything, but I really understood that this universe is really big and I wanted to explore it. So that kind of launched me into a voracious ingesting of any sort of spiritual books I could get my hands on, or workshops or classes. And I studied comparative world religions in college and graduate school and traveled around the world to see if I could actually also learn from the lived experience of people, not just the books. So it's really been my passion for my whole life.
Yeah, and your voyages took you to some far-off places. You were in Tibet and places of Asia, right?
Yeah. I was in India and Tibet and Turkey and Eastern Europe, and I just sort of went wherever I found myself the most drawn at that moment. And then I usually, when I got someplace, I usually sank into it for a while because I really wanted to figure out what I was feeling, and to try to understand all these different people and these belief systems. And, throughout it all, starting from when I was a child, if I was, really honest about what I was following and what I was sensing or what I was trying to understand, it was this aspect, that I could sense within my own heart of wanting to know who and what the divine was, that I felt, but I was trying to locate this divinity outside of myself.
And did you ever label yourself through your many voyages, or were you always just basically a heretic like me?
I think I've just always been a natural born heretic. I didn't even use that word till later, but I never fit in. I really tried. I would go to the monasteries, go to the teachers, read the texts, do the practices, participate in rituals, and the whole time I was just I could see the beauty that was in many of them. I could sense, the wisdom and the power that was there, and I also was I don't feel right here. Like something isn't fully embracing my entirety in this, that I can't really see my full reflection in these, and there was some sort of incongruity there. And so just very naturally, I think I was a heretic.
Their book is called A Spiritual Biography. What exactly is a spiritual biography?
Well, spiritual memoirs are, I didn't know till after I wrote most of the book that that's what this was, but it's kind of like a mashup. It's a mixture between, your own story, so my own story, but the focus is really on the spiritual backbone of your life. And it includes not just your stories, but any sort of research you've picked up that has helped you understand your story more, or deepened your story, or challenged your story, and also any sort of, kind of out there visions you've had, or mystical experiences, kind of dialogues with the divine. Like, it's sort of this funky mashup. So I think it's a lot less about literary style or scholarship and much more about soul style.
You want to tell the listener how probably really one of the most gut-wrenching parts of your book was the part that you wrote the book and it basically wasn't going to get published.
So, I was hired by my publisher. I signed a contract to write a book that was actually more in line with my first book, which is called The Red Book, A Deliciously Unorthodox Approach to Igniting Your Divine Spark. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but it was more of it's a little bit more of a
Sounds like somebody else
self.
wrote something like that. Doesn't ring a bell. Somebody else might have stolen your title. Can't think of it, Sarah. Can't think of it.
I had no idea. I have to say, after I wrote The Red Book, and it was like, I think it was a few years later where someone was like, do you know Carl Jung had something called The Red Book? And I was like, get out. And then when it came out, I think, finally, they published The Red Book. I think it was 3 or 4 years after The Red Book came out, and I was just like, this isn't good. My book doesn't even stand a chance.
Yeah.
We can't even hold a candle to his book. No, but I so appreciate that man, Carl Jung, and his work has been a huge influence, and I'm just, really grateful for him. But I think that with my publisher, they wanted me to write something similar to The Red Book. And I went through a very intense, writer's block of about a full year. Anything I tried to write that was along those sort of lines, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't come out. It wasn't until I started having just, more experiences and that I began to realize that I needed to write more my own story, so more of what, a spiritual memoir. And I did, and it's risky. It's not the most conventional book. And I finally handed it into my publisher, and my publisher was just basically like, this book will never sell. Like, it is so not relatable. It's strange. Your experiences are just weird. Your writing is weird. Like, you don't have the chops to do it. Just basically any one of my fears about the book, they pretty much just spat back in my face, and I had to make a decision, if I was going to continue to to support and sort of continue to write this awkward memoir, or stay with my publisher. So I ended up breaking contract with them and pretty much losing my livelihood and in order to write this book. So it's been a huge journey. I mean, I think like any creative project, this book has just been an intense spiritual practice. It's made me have to face like all my shadows, all of my fears. It's made me have to also face like my golden shadow and like just the natural gifts that I and everybody do have. So it's been intense. I've been through a lot for this book, and it's kind of funny because it's just a book. Like, I look at it and I'm like, it's just a book. But what I've been through, like the labor of this book, completely changed my life and transformed me, and just like it was intense. I'm still recovering.
Your publisher wanted another new age self-help book, like we don't have enough.
Yeah.
What genre would you put your book into? I'm already thinking where I would look for it in a bookstore.
Yeah, I don't know. They don't give us enough. there's no genre for that. They don't have like a heretical aisle, you know. I think it's just, but you know, you bring up, I mean, what you're saying, it's really fascinating because pulling away and like breaking contact with my publisher, like on one hand, that's just sort of this symbol. It's just like this thing I had to do, but I was really astonished by how difficult it was to do that. And what I was realizing, and it continued, you know, for the years afterwards, was I was like pulling away from what you just said, sort of like a new age, self-help, spiritual, mainstream arena and paradigm. And it's really sticky, and it's very seductive, and it's confusing because it's, you know, quote unquote spiritual, and it's there to help and serve other people. And so when you're in it, you think that is what you are doing, and many people are, you know. So I don't want to like just bash it because there's some beautiful things happening and some beautiful work that is getting out into the world. But it's like any arena or any sort of burst of consciousness, there's also like a huge shadow side, and most of it's, you know, made up of our own shadows. So if you're out in the world these days and you're somehow sharing some spiritual information, we all have these wounds, you know, these childhood wounds that are seeking also unconsciously to be admired or to be a guru or to be seen as special or holy or something like that. So those wounds like will get activated in that arena, like any arena. And I think for me, I really had to look at my own and also be willing to see sort of the dark behind this arena and allow the veils to drop and see the matrix that is within the spiritual arena. So it was a big wake-up call for me personally, and then also, you know, on that collective level, just kind of noticing it.
One of the many things I like about your book is that most people either assume that mysticism is some cold, transcendent, stoic pursuit, or they go to the other side where it's some sort of, you know, mechanical, sex, magic, orgiastic thing. As you write, mysticism and sensuality can be together in a sort of middle path.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that the balance is probably unique for each one of us, and I think it's like trying to respect what's out there, because I do think on one hand, since they have been so forcibly separated, you know, just sort of traditionally, like religion and sexuality and mysticism and eros, like there's been a lot of separation from these external forces or these dogmas or traditions. But, you know, and so just naturally, like the human being is seeking to reignite and to reunite with those forces. And how that's going to play out is going to be different for each of us. And some people it's going to be like to swing in one direction or swing in the other direction. But sometimes we got to swing in these directions in order to like even understand, you know, what we're kind of unleashing and where we're kind of getting out of balance. So, yeah, I mean, I think the sex magic and kind of swinging way over into that side, it's really interesting. Like, and I think it releases something for people, and then I also think it can become its own really unhealthy habit. And it's just another way to escape the reality of mysticism, because for me, the mystical isn't some like far out, like wiggy, trippy thing. I'm actually suspicious sometimes when it gets to like far out, wiggy, like just being off in ecstasy all the time. I'm more like, oh, what is actually like the real deal? You know, what's the thing that actually grounds our heels into this reality while also opening our eyes to the other realities?
I think you say it very well in one chapter, Sarah, when you're discussing the sacred prostitute archetype or the priestess archetype. Is very simple. If you, as a priestess or a woman, serve love, it will be good. But if you have love serve you, that's when things go wrong. Yeah.
And that's a quote from Nancy Qualls Corbett, who's a Jungian analyst who wrote the Sacred Prostitutes. I just want to credit her, but that's the gist. I mean, that she pretty much just like told it straight up when I interviewed her, because you know I'm in Northern California, so there's a whole host of, you know, quote unquote sacred prostitutes and dakinis and tantrikas and, you know, people doing this sort of sacred sex work and, you know, a lot of it's, you know, very well intentioned and again is like doing some good things. But like if this shadow work and this sort of personal, just kind of normal psychological work also hasn't been addressed, it's going to manifest through the mystical. It will, and it will sort of take advantage of these really powerful archetypes that are trying to work their way through our bodies and like through our sexualities and through our lives. And so it's fascinating. I mean, I had to watch it in my own life for sure. Like I had to go through that and look at that and see how I was, possibly like abusing this archetype, abusing others in the name of this archetype, and manipulating this energy to sort of serve my own, my own needs or my own, wanting to be loved or something. And so really having to face that stuff just feels like it's necessary. And it requires, I think the mystical path requires this sort of vigilance. And this is sort of, to me, and this is my definition of it, but this gnosis, to know yourself, to me means you got to know all of yourself, like all of your shit and all of your shine. And it requires all of it. And it's going to shove it in your face, or it's going to come out in some other sort of, covert way. But the willingness to see it and to work with it is the true heretic.
And the color and concept of red is very important in your life and your incarnation. Could you tell the listener a bit about red?
Yeah. So this divine, presence that I felt since I was a child and I was seeking throughout all of my studies, would show up for me more often than not through the color or energy of red. So it would show up in a story about the Buddhist teacher Saraha meeting, this red woman, having this red woman vision in a jungle who was actually a Dakini. Or it would show up when I would learn about Rumi, the mystic poet, and how Shams, the man who really propelled Rumi into his own heart, which later turned into this stream of mystical poetry. Shams is said to have shown up in Rumi's life wearing red. And then we have Kali, the Hindu goddess with her long red tongue, and Mary Magdalene, and always portrayed in her red robes or red hair, and Eve with her red apple, and Lilith with her red sea, and the Whore of Babylon, and all these characters started showing up, and these qualities of sort of eros and vitality and the forbidden and the unconventional and the transgressive and the real sort of liberation, they all were poking through these mediums that I had in front of me, and more often than not, it had to deal with red. So nobody else was really calling all this red, but I was doing that, and over time, it developed into actually me talking about red as an actual presence and as an actual feminine presence. So I started talking about it like her, and the Red Lady, and people were like, we don't know who you're talking about. And I was like, I don't know either, but I'm trying to find out. And so this presence, just really grew stronger and stronger in my life, and I began to understand that this presence was actually the thing behind all these mediums, So the Red Lady wasn't Mary Magdalene. It wasn't Kali. It wasn't Eve. It was her peeking through them and kind of poking me and reminding me of who I was. So red is really who this book and what this book is dedicated to. It's both an offering to red, and I feel like it's an offering, from red. And so, yeah, it's really been my life's passion. So, I mean, not to give away the end of the book, but it's kind of obvious that by the end of the book, I'd come to realize and recognize that the Red Lady, is my own being. And her sort of interpretation of the universe is a little bit heretical. So I had to get sort of broken down, and all of my studies and all of my beliefs that I had so carefully collected had to be, let go of and smashed, and I had to be burned, and before I could actually really approach and understand her. And I'm still learning. I don't have any big answers, but it's sort of my big revelation and my big revolution is recognizing that the thing I had been pursuing my entire life was actually an aspect of my own distinct divine being, and the kind of crazy, gorgeous beauty of it is that she was also reaching towards me throughout my entire life. So it's bigger than a projection.
Yeah, it's an amazing energy. I always get Red seems to be the shadow. She's like the psychic part of you that you cannot ignore, but then seems to be an archetype. And then I think, well, Red maybe is like Sarah's Philemon. It's a multi-dimensional archetype of archetypes. It's
yeah, it is. It's crazy. I mean, that's what I would try to, understand. It's like my occult studies, I was like, maybe she's my guardian angel. And when I was doing this real far out energy work, I was like, God, is she like some just like goddess from a different dimension? Is she like an ascended master? Is she like just some like really like strong spirit guide? And then Jungian studies, I was like, is she just an archetype? And then I was like, maybe she's just the facet of the goddess of this universe. I mean, I went through the whole spectrum of really trying to, understand. And while I do think she's pieces of all of that, she is something for me that I haven't been able to find an external reflection for, or like something I can anchor her into. So that's sort of been like the heresy of my own, of my own life, is that I couldn't find what she was in any tradition or any non-tradition or any New Age derivative, and it was kind of maddening, and it created a lot of self-doubt in me, but it also opened me up to, to this process, which was very transformative, and it does. I mean, when I think about, and this wasn't even something that was purely like conscious, I subtitled this book, A Heretic's Love Story, pretty much after I wrote it. But, I think this is true for all of us, but I definitely did get this, and I still am having this experience of wow, like when you are sharing something with the world that actually like a perspective on the divine that hasn't really been talked about, that I'm aware of that much, it is very scary. It's like an ancient fear you feel in your cells, and you're like, oh God, like I know that feeling of fire, that all of those, heretics who've come before us have been through, and it's different in the modern age, and we're safer in some ways, of course, but it is an intense process, and I think just like I said, I think it's true for all of us, to trust our own knowing and our own experiences, and to really understand that that's it, like that's actually the game changer, it's not so much about us comparing our experiences to others or thinking, hoping they're going to fit or trying to make them fit into something that's come before, but allowing them to be organic and allowing ourselves to actually have them, and that way we get to have ourselves.
I would definitely say, to me, I see the Red Lady as very much a projection of Sophia. And let me tell you what I got, or how I saw it in the book. In one part, you write, the Red Lady is not the goddess of this universe. She is a goddess in love with the universe. And that, to me, describes Sophia, because she is the ultimate alien who is so invested in this world, but is still the ultimate outsider of this world of wisdom. And when you read the Gnostic texts, she always has this dreamlike quality. In one paragraph, she's Eve. In the next paragraph, she's Barbelo. In the next paragraph, she splits up into these different hypostases and characteristics. And even at the end of the Gnostic text, after Jesus is done talking, you always have this sense like, well, who is Sophia anyway? I mean, the wisdom of the god, or is she a goddess? Is she, she's everything, and I don't want to use that cliche, and nobody. So that's what I got.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's really cool. And that's actually very much what she, definitely what she feels like to me, because there's this real outsider quality, to the Red Lady, and there's this real alien-like aspect, and she's really clear that she's not from this universe, but she's here visiting.
She's very invested and in love with this universe, even though it sucks. But
yeah, and that's sort of the trip, and that's definitely what she, asks me to do and to participate in. Like, can I love this place, even though it is so crazy, difficult, and hard, and strange, and messy. And can I love it here? And actually, that's the real gift, and that's actually what, you know, she's always reminding me, like, that's what I'm here for and what everyone's here for. So I mean, she to me definitely has this very sort of egalitarian aspect to her too, which is like, everybody is not from this universe. Like, we're all visitors, and everyone has this like amazing. They are gods, you know, gods and goddesses here, visiting and experiencing themselves within this universe and with the god of this universe and the goddess of this universe, and, you know, experiencing themselves in all these different dimensions, and learning here and sharing here, so to reconnect with this, to reconnect, you know, with our divine spark, but actually also the distinct divine being behind that we are a projection of, and we are from, is kind of like the big return, and like the big applause maker. And so, and for most of us, like, we've just been so separated, you know, from our own distinct divinity, and that there hasn't been a lot of support for us in the traditions to connect with our own divine being. There has been a lot of support, you know, to connect to something outside of us, but to actually go within and to connect to our own being and actually see that it's an eternal being is a whole different situation and perspective. And, you know, I don't claim any of this is the truth. These are just things, you know, that I've been experiencing. I call them revelations, you know, through her and with her. And it's been, it's kind of wiped my spiritual slate clean of what I thought I knew here. Yeah, good times.
Yeah, exactly. Whoa.
Yeah.
They're going to have us committed after this if we don't watch out.
Probably. I know, if you're having any trouble before this,
yeah, no kidding. Yeah, we can certainly get into that. But first, in Red Hot and Holy, you do talk. You bring up an amazing array of feminine and masculine heroes and heroines, and you certainly talk about the Gnostic ones, Mary Magdalene, and a few others. But one that many miss, and you definitely give a lot of you write a lot about, is Saint Sera Beak. Could you tell us about her?
Saint Sera Beak is a saint that is located mostly in the south of France. Her icon is in the small town called Sainte Marie de la Mer, and that's the town where legend has it that Mary Magdalene and Mary Jacobe and Mary Salome and a few others in their crew came because of the persecution after the crucifixion. And Saint Sera Beak, the two sort of main legends about her are either that she was an Egyptian servant girl of Magdalene, or that she was already a young gypsy queen in the south of France who welcomed Magdalene and her crew. But she's known as the Queen of the Outsiders and has become like the patron saint of the gypsies. And she is kept in an underground shrine, while like Mary Magdalene and the other Marys are kept up above in this very light-filled church. And this is because Saint Sera Beak is not canonized or really recognized by the church. But every year she is taken out. I think her date is May 24th, and there's a huge procession of her to the sea and a big celebration. And like I said, she's known as the Queen of the Outsiders to the gypsies, who many of which who have felt like outsiders in Europe. But the more heretical oral traditions and legends that have circulated around France for centuries have said that she's a representation of, Sera Beak is a representation of the actual child between Mary Magdalene and Jesus. So kind of similar to the Dark Madonna, Sera Beak, because she's also dark in countenance. It's considered to be sort of lost in consciousness, something that's been hidden from us, and something that had to be protected and hidden. And it's not I mean, there's plenty of people in the pop cultural, like, fantasy Da Vinci Code world, that have taken the whole bloodline thing and, like, run with it, and I get that, and, but I also really do see her as this extraordinary archetype of the third, or sort of this new trinity of the divine masculine, the divine feminine, and the holy child, which is more often than not, we get Horus or Jesus, this story comes from all over the globe, is normally, a male. And with this particular story, it would be a female. And symbolically, that's really important. And it's something that feels really significant because, all of us do know that the feminine has been severely repressed and that there is just a natural balance that is being sought right now, in our psyches and on this planet. And so she's someone who has shown up very strongly in my own life and really taken me by surprise. And she's shown up in such a way that I really have to take her seriously. Like, I fought against it, but I have to really take what she represents and actually also, which, academics like hate this, and being a recovering scholar, I get it, but I have to take the possibility that she was a flesh and blood human really seriously. And I think this is also, for me, part of what this Gnosis and this sort of Gnostic, I wouldn't call it Gnostic, I would just say this Gnosis has been for me, is, trusting this inner reality. And no matter how kind of incredible it can seem to our egos and kind of how mismatched it might be with the external world's information or, history books or scholarship, that Gnosis definitely propels us into a reality that many would say is more real than this reality. And it's in that reality that Sera exists very strongly. And so part of me having to, learn about her and also begin to trust what I'm being shown is kind of out of respect for that reality that so many way more plugged in people than me have experienced over the years, and just so, while keeping an open mind and keeping myself grounded and, aware of all the projections that can go on, I also really, this is a being to me, and she's back.
Yeah. Well, the Gnostics, some have called them the perennial geeks, and since we're both enjoy Jeff Kripal's work, we know that history and reality is a lot of fiction, and fiction is more real than, as you said, than reality itself many times.
Yeah, for sure. I know in my experiences with Gnosis, which I'm always like, this is crazier than fiction. Hell, this is crazier than science fiction, but you just got to keep going with it and, keep questioning and keep looking. And I think, also holding everything very respectfully, and gently. But, I've learned the hard way. My resistances to it have, been worn down over the years. And I'm having to really keep my mind and heart open to this stuff.
Another individual who you write about, and of course this would probably annoy a lot of modern feminists and Protestants, and certainly a lot of occultists, is the Virgin Mary, which you detail a lot, again, in the Red Hot and Holy. And could you tell us about her, or you can simply answer very well, as you do in your book, by simply quoting Thunder the Perfect Mind?
Yeah. The Virgin Mary is just, the other half of that divine pie, just like Magdalene, is sitting across from her. And the Virgin and the whore, and they've been so separated from their, what I would consider, from my perspective, just like their true meanings, and really like the punch that they can give all of us in the stomach, which is just like the Virgin, according to many Greek interpretations, is, one into yourself, and it represents a fullness and a wholeness, and not being so affected or concerned about external ideas or what other people think, and really owning your own being and your own reality and your own truth and standing strong in that. And that's actually, the meaning of virgin. And then the sacred prostitute archetype is something about really being willing to know it all, and knowing yourself, knowing life, knowing sexuality, knowing love, and they go hand in hand, because you actually can't be an effective person who has integrated the sacred archetype prostitute if you actually haven't also learned how to be a virgin, a one into yourself. And also, in the aspect of Gnosis, Cynthia Bourgeault, talks about that path of Gnosis is this call to be virgin, because again, you're going to be pushed into these, you're taking the red pill, you're pushed into these directions, and if you don't start building up enough confidence in your own being, or just standing for your own being, even if you don't have confidence in it, you're gonna get slapped around a bit. So they all support each other in these beautiful ways. And so the Virgin Mary has really I was, raised Catholic, and she had no interest for me growing up, because I just found her way too vanilla and just completely whitewashed by the church. And it's interesting because how Magdalene's often portrayed in paintings, are in these red robes, and the Virgin was actually also portrayed in red robes very often, but in the 1600s, the Inquisition put a stop to that because it was too related to Mary Magdalene. So they wanted her to only be portrayed in blue and white, and that was, part of many of the separations that were enforced by the church between, our sexuality and our spirituality, etc. But they're coming back together in all of us. They're really seeking to be reunited, because that is where the power is, and that actually is what threatens patriarchy like nothing else.
For all the polemics against the ancients being sexist or primitive, goddesses like Isis and Venus were called virgins. It was a title of honor, which, as you say, signified that they were full women in all their aspects.
Nice.
So now we're getting back to that. But one thing you did sort of ruin for me, because now I can't look at this image anymore without thinking about it. You're describing Our Lady of Guadalupe, and it's true, but you say she basically looks like one big-ass vagina.
I know, and when I got this, my friend gave me this great Virgin of Guadalupe, very colorful, kind of kitschy, poster years ago, and I was laying on the floor of my living room one day, and I looked up, and I was like, whoa, there's a vagina, and I was like, I can't be the only one who's seeing this. I was like, it is so clear. Wait, what? I was just sitting there what's happening? And then it just sort of felt like a great...
I was like, oh my God.
I know, it's there. It's really there. And the thing is, any sort of, for me, revelation or sort of transmission, there was really authentic truth that was there. I know saying this can just sound provocative, but in the moment it was really this sort of holy hilarity. The divine feminist has been playing this great cosmic joke on all of us, because millions of people worship the Virgin of Guadalupe every day, and I'm like, yeah, so this sort of makes sense. They should be worshiping the vagina in this way. So it was just very kind of innocent in this honest way.
We don't worship the vagina. Who are you talking about? I know I do.
Yeah, no, it was a good one for me to get. It was important. So she definitely is the Virgin has many dimensions to her, many dimensions. So they're good to come across in your own way and to decipher in your own way.
And your book, of course, is definitely full of humor. You're discussing, you decided to embrace the sacred prostitute through a stage of your life. And, I'm reading, and it's wonderful, it's great. And then at one point you go, oh my God, what if my parents read this? And that, to me, made me laugh, because that's something I would think, always, no matter how mature we are, what would my mom think?
Oh, completely. I mean, so much of this book, that chapter in particular for sure was, I was just thinking about my parents so much, and I was like, my poor dad, he's the father of 3 girls, and I was like, this is the last thing he even wants to remotely hear about, so it was definitely, part of the spiritual practice, I would call it. And, since the book came out about a week ago, and I've just been like holding my breath because my dad ordered like 10 books, and I just, and I wrote to him and I was like, you don't have to read, there's a chapter in there that would make any dad uncomfortable, you don't have to read it. And he did, he read the entire book, and he sent me such a wonderful email a few days ago, and I feel like the first time in like years I was able to actually like exhale. I was like, okay, my dad's okay, he's going to be okay. But yeah, it is interesting, no matter how old we are, like what we go through, there's this real like, family orientation still, and we still want to protect them, and yeah, we don't want to upset them too much.
No, well, my answer again is read Thunder to the Perfect Mind. That's all you need to know about the women right now, the divine feminine.
Exactly.
It's all there.
Exactly. It is so all there.
And the other thing that's all there too, and we talked about, is Whole Foods. How come all the exciting things happen to you at Whole Foods? I mean, like I said, I end up losing all my money because it's so expensive, but no mystic encounters or sacred prostitutes, nothing like that at Whole Foods.
I don't know.
Which one do you go
Miguel.
to?
You might need to go back to Whole Foods and just keep your eyes open, keep your inner eyes open, because who knows what's near the fruit section. I don't know.
I'll see the color red and attack it and get arrested. I know that's probably better stay away.
Yeah, no, Whole Foods it's an interesting joint. Yeah, and it is pricey. I'm now at Trader Joe's. I've moved on.
Yes, your spirituality has evolved, I see.
It's evolved.
Hopefully your bank account, too.
It's evolved as my bank account has dwindled.
That usually happens. Another very interesting concept you talk about in your book is that of the red tent. What is the red tent, Sarah?
Yeah, that's actually the title of a book that came out a while ago, and I'm forgetting, unfortunately, the name of the woman who wrote it, but any woman listening to this will know the book because it was a huge bestseller. And it was a historical fiction novel about some of the biblical times in the Old Testament, and looking at the women and creating these stories of how the women would gather together in a red tent when one of them was giving birth, or if they were going through menstruation, or some of them was sick. It was like their time, and no men were allowed, and it was just this really sweet little space. And so that idea resonated with so many, and resonates with so many modern women. And so after that book came out, women were creating red tents at from festivals to parties to just, retreats all over the world. And for me, I created one when I was going through what I call a red night of the soul, but I needed to really back away from about 95% of my professional life and personal life because I was going through this really intense inner process and transformation, and it required almost complete solitude. And it lasted, the real intensity of it lasted for about 3.5 years. But I do know now that, spiritually I will always be in the red tent, but it's sort of like a cocoon, or like a womb. You get cooked. You get cooked. And a lot of weird stuff happens in the red tent, and a lot of really, revelatory stuff happens, and it's probably different for each one of us. But I do think every single person needs some form of it, whether it's a physical room or it's just their own, and they're away from everything else, including email and phones and TV. And it's also just a spiritual space where you're really able to just be with you and your soul and go into a dialogue with the divine and really allow stuff to show up for you and through you and in you. And it requires privacy, and it requires devotion and trust, and I needed a willingness to go there, and it's for me, it's not been an easy process. I've tried to escape the red tent many times over the years because I was I just want to be normal. Can't I just go out and date? And during that time period, my red lady would sort of pull me back in and just be like, you got to respect this process. You might not understand it, but you're being kind of you need to stay in this sort of like holding tank, because there is something your soul is going through, and you might not get it, but you do need to respect it. So I do think each of us is getting that sort of beckoning, to take those steps deeper into ourselves. And it's going to look different for each one of us, but it is going to require, even if it's just 5 minutes every day, but just really to give yourself that privacy and to create that space for your soul to kind of show you something new.
Yeah, I think men have it. We call it the bathroom. It's our private place where we learn. Where we learn so much. Yes. But let's try and get serious here. Something that we also both agree on is the idea of false life. And of course, again, those in the esoterica and humanists definitely disagree with it because of its supernatural dualistic connotations. Tell us about the false light out there, Sarah.
Yeah, and this is something, we talked about before the interview. I would love for you to share, like, your perspective and experience on as well. I know for me it has become very important to discern the difference between, these are labels, but the difference between the true light and the false light. And this is, I didn't really know. Part of what went down on the red tent was a real, dumbing down. I had to let go of a lot of beliefs and all of, everything I studied at Harvard and all these ideas and theories and concepts that I had absorbed over the years. There was a time of where they were really kind of getting scraped out of me. What was interesting was, when I was calling things true light and false light, I kind of forgot. I didn't remember, or I didn't really link it up with the fact that that is actually also something that, in some cases, some words that are, ascribed to Gnostics have used that same terminology, true light and false light. And they might have meant something different than what I'm about to say, but I just know for me, true light and false light stretches, both with beings, so like actually external beings, meaning like spirit guides and deities and angels and, all those things that we hear about. And it's just this important awareness that the false light can look like the true light, meaning just because like a really, powerful, glittery, glowing angel or, being shows up, it might not, and it makes you feel very blissful and it's very loving and it, is saying really gorgeous things, it might not actually be truthful. It might not actually be in service and honoring your own divine authority and sovereignty. So a lot of times for me, false light beings are kind of tricky because they look like the true light. And they often, and for me, like true light beings are not they do not want worship. They kind of ping pong projections back at you. They rarely ask you to use their energy, or their light or special symbols. They don't have these agendas. They're not trying to get you to like implement something or, carry out this big mission. Usually they're very much about sort of returning you to your own divine power source and sovereignty. And likewise, kind of what I would say almost like true light spirituality or messages or information that I receive, they always have this more like organic quality to them. They feel very natural. They where the false light I would say has more of like a synthetic thing. It's like the difference between like a candy bar and an apple, where like the candy bar tastes better and kind of like gets us really high for a while. We're like, woo, this shit's good. Sugar rush. And then we crash and we're like, wow, I don't feel that great, but I don't really know why. I can't wait till I eat another candy bar. Where like the apple, it's like, it doesn't always taste as good, but it actually nourishes us, and there's something, more sustaining about it and encouraging about it for our own natures. So, this is a whole like big topic, and there's other people. There's a man named George Cavasilas in Australia who talks about, the true light and the false light, and uses some of the same language. And he was really helpful for me to come across because his experiences are different than mine in the big universe, but actually these experiences of true light and false light and sort of being able to notice the difference is really similar to mine. And then why this is so important, why it's been so important for me, and to kind of ground it a bit more is, it's just to recognize, and this is sort of like a big statement so people can like take it or drop kick it away, but part of what I've had to just see is that a lot of things that I thought were quote unquote spiritual on this planet, for me now have more of a sort of false light quality to them. And that's an incredible wake-up call. That's like taking 20 red pills. It's when you start to notice the difference between true light and false light, you're like, what the fuck has been going on this planet? And the religion department, like, what? And so that's disturbing. It's very disturbing, and it's also something that's important because we have false, obviously, within us, false light within us. So, it takes one to know one. So it requires me to have to do the work to look and see where I've latched on to spiritual practices or things in my own career that were not actually really supporting another person's soul, but were actually subtly manipulating it or seducing it or trying to, get it to get on my red bandwagon or whatever, kind of distracting people from their own unique path. So it's a rabbit hole, and it's a really big subject, but it's been very important for me to come across these two, to make these discernments. And I also know, like, as we've talked about, people like don't like it because it sounds so dualistic and it sounds like we're separating things. But for me, if you can't recognize the false, it's really freaking hard to recognize the true.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with you. I mean, what you say, and I've talked about it on this show in my writings plenty, obviously goes to the concept of the archons and how they keep us down by creating, of course, as you say, the matrix around us. And God, I could talk about it all day. I remember having Tessa Dick, the widow of Phil Dick, on the show, and she talked about how the greatest exorcists of our times always said, when you die and you see the light, don't go to the light, like they say in TV and the books, because that's the false light. And that resonated with me, or how the Bible says, Satan clothes himself like an angel of light. And yeah, it goes on and on. It certainly resonates with me. And your book reminded me, and your ideas of false light reminded me of Stephen Pressfield. He is the author of The Legend of Bagger Vance, which was made into a movie with Matt Damon. And he wrote a book called Do the Work. And he talks about these themes, but he comes from a Jewish, a Kabbalist background, and he calls it resistance. And it's the resistance that keeps us asleep, keeps us ignorant, but mostly keeps us from expressing our artistic self, which is the true death in this universe. And he basically said, like you, that resistance doesn't come with demons and pitchforks. It comes in the manifestation of your family telling to sit down and watch TV, or your priest telling you to read this. It's this benign, killing you soft with the universe's song. So,
yes.
So what you said made perfect sense.
Yes. Oh my God, it's so true, and I think that's the brilliance, of it. Like, I have to say, I have so much more respect for the false light, and what I would even venture to say, and this is again gonna like make some people squirm out there, but even like some of the dark forces. And I remember talking to Andrew Harvey, who's a scholar and a mystic, and I remember being like, what is the deal? Like, why are spiritual people so against acknowledging like the reality of dark forces, like not just as projections and not as like old school like Christian stuff, but just like the authentic, like, yeah, there's people on this planet that would like to take your job and
right, yeah.
to have you
as
not
above,
succeed.
so below. As above, so below, right?
And he was like, and I remember him just sort of like saying very, fiery as he does, and he was like, Sarah, that is because people here are mystically illiterate. And I was like, okay, so for him and for, my own experience, it sounds like for you too, like this is, part of the path is just sort of we might have different experiences with it or perspectives on it, but it's just to keep our eyes open and to recognize that life is made up of light and dark, and this universe is made up of light and dark, and we are made up of light and dark, and that there are many different things inside of us and outside of us that are working for us and against us, and that's like the setup. That's the gig of this universe. And to deny, one or the other isn't really being respectful to what life is about in this universe, I feel. But it's sneaky. I mean, I think some of the false light and what you were talking about with Stephen Prescott, I definitely see that. I feel like it works hand in hand with our psyche, and they work hand in hand with our own issues. So, to just think it's a psychological aspect is kind of doing yourself a disservice, and to only think it's like an external force is also doing yourself a disservice. But to really do the work and see like where we are kind of succumbing to certain things inside of ourselves, which allows for some of that external resistance to sort of flow stronger into us. It's important, it's exactly part of the work.
Would you say that part of Gnosis is this acknowledgement? I always like to say, well, and you talk about the red pill, but when Neo takes the red pill, he doesn't see this wonderful kumbaya, Deepak Chopra, wonderful John Tesh in the background playing music. He sees reality for what it is. Later on, he becomes a being of light, but he sees a really bad place that he needs to fix. That's the first step of Gnosis.
Exactly, and that's part of it, and I think it's I think it's part of the sacred path, and that's why I find it, I feel confused and kind of sad that we have all these like misgivings, or we've just psychologized it, out, or we've just sort of made it very new agey and woo-woo to talk about these different forces and things, and it's a real awakening, and I know for me, I could say like, yeah, I definitely can see like the matrix within, the economic system and the social system and the political system and, all these different things out there. But one of the more sort of wake up calls, for me was seeing it also in like the mainstream American spirituality arena. And then I was like, oh, Jesus, like it's everywhere. like I knew it about traditional religions, for instance, but, and how easy it is to be a part of that system. And again, I'm not trying to bash like that arena at all because there's so much good in it. But I also do think we have to keep our eyes open in that arena and just be willing to say our truth, and be willing to recognize when things don't feel as authentic or as truthful as they could be.
So what advice would you have for women or anybody seeking to write a book or find their own spirituality? I mean, I'm assuming it starts with finding their own version of the Red Lady, their own holy archetype or super archetype.
Yeah. I mean, all of anything that I do now, like workshops or anything like that, that's our focus, is just to reconnect with our divine spark, you can call it soul, or you can call it divine being, or inner god or goddess, and to really take the steps towards creating a more conscious relationship with it, because it is a relationship, and most of us have been pretty estranged from that relationship. So it's part of that process is everything that we've been talking about tonight, where you will have to start facing everything that has come in front of that relationship, or that you've placed in front of that relationship, or that's been placed in front of it, from something or someone else. So it's a real personal excavation, and it's, for me, from my perspective, it's the only path worth taking, is the one inside, and that from that path, it's like where we'll be led to do what we're here to do in the world, and if we need other information, we'll be led to it, but it all comes from the inside out. And I just find that most of my work is kind of just reminding women to notice baggage and sort of the layers that they've put on top of their own being, from spiritual techniques or teachings or beliefs, or social ones or political ones, and just noticing them and just allowing them to brush away if they're not in alignment with you anymore, or if they're actually preventing you from knowing yourself. So it starts off kind of lightly, like you're just getting to know yourself, and then you're like, yeah. I mean, actually, how we start every Red Revolution workshop is we take a red pill, a red hot candy, and I'm like, this might seem like a little silly, fun ritual, but it's not. Like, what ends up happening after this, if you do it consciously, if you actually really consciously take the red pill, you're kind of saying to your own divine spark, your own being, like you're fastening your seatbelt. You're like, okay, I'm actually ready to really go in now, and it will take you.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's like we talked about. We expect the heroes in our stories and James Bond and Jesus and Buddha to get their asses kicked, but we want it easy. We want to just go to the end and be with the credits. And
it's so true. It's so true, and it's not. I mean, it's not been easy for me, and I don't think for most people who are doing this, and that's kind of the fallacy and the unfortunate side effect of some of the new age information out there is sometimes, we think if we just think positively, or we just raise our vibration, or we say positive affirmations, or we change our thoughts, that our reality is instantly going to change. And sometimes that does work, and all those things are, can be really helpful. But for the deep, soul work, the deep sort of traversing within ourselves, like that stuff just looks like cotton candy when you're doing this work. Like you just realize, like it can't touch these realms that much. They actually don't belong together. And to understand that the divine path is painful, and it is blissful, and it is excruciating, and it is ecstatic, is part of becoming a spiritual adult. Yeah, so I think the universe is asking us to grow up right now.
Oh boy, I don't want to leave this room. I'm scared, but I better run into the bathroom while you run to the red tent or something. But anyway, Sarah, so what do you have in next? I mean, you just wrote a book, and that's it. So when's the next book going to come out?
Yeah, these books have ripped me a new one, so I'm not sure. I have the title for the next book, which is Red Revelations, and that one feels a little bit more, I think with each book I write, my lady pushes me to my limits and really over them, so I can, take another step and be of more service here. And so this book was one step, and it was a confusing one. And this next step actually feels really interesting. Revelations almost has this feeling that this was the book I think I've been trying to write for lifetimes. And I had to go through a lot of things in order to be able to remember and to actually start accessing this information inside myself again. So it has this sort of more interesting, I was like, if I don't lose people with Red Hot and Holy, I might really lose people with Revelations. But it feels like I gotta go in that direction, and I'll find out. Each book has been sort of a surprise, so I'll find out.
Well, we certainly look forward to your next book, but I think that's all the time we have today, Sarah. I'd like to thank you very much for coming on Aeon Byte and discussing your very intriguing and very insightful book, Red Hot and Holy, A Heretic's Love Story.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.